Welcome back to the program. It's still Morning Delight here on Lagos Television, the Thursday edition, and we're talking about guiding against corrupt practices during the 2023 polls. But I'm sure the question that will come to mind is, how can corrupt practices be perpetrated during an election? Well, I do have a guest in the house this morning, and together we'll take a look at some of the issues that we will see as corrupt practices, especially now the campaign has started. So many things people take for granted, and yet they are wrong. My guest this morning is the Executive Director, Human Rights Advancement Development and Advocacy Center, HURIDAC, Ayodele, Ameen. Thank you so much for being on the program today.
Good morning, madam. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Now, let me start this way. Corruption, many people have said it is endemic, especially to us here in Nigeria. And part of what this present administration came on board with, riding on the facts that we will fight corruption. We will ensure that corrupt practices are nipped in the bud. At some point in time, the president did say that when you fight corruption for corruption, we'll fight you back. Yeah. So it's becoming more or less like we're beginning to see it like, well, if you cannot win them, then perhaps you join them. So let me start this way. When we talk about corruption, and we take a look at the history of Nigeria, especially during democratic rule, and how far we've fared in the fight against corruption. What have you found out, especially as a group? What are some of the things that you have come to realize that perhaps are peculiar to Nigeria when you're talking about issues surrounding corruption?
Thank you very much, madam. I think, first of all, let me correct some misconception.
Okay.
Corruption is not peculiar to Nigeria. It happens in many
places,
countries,
okay?
But not all African countries. Recently, I think 2 days ago, we launched an anti-corruption fact sheet and political manifesto of political parties. Part of the presentation at that event by one of our board members, Michael Oyeka, was the efficiency of a dollar. And you have a ranking online whereby you look at what is the efficiency of a dollar, and Rwanda ranked number 5 globally in the world, above United Kingdom, that what they get in return to government for each dollar they spend is massive. Nigeria ranked 120.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I'm just looking at that from the development point of view. But let's come back to Nigeria, like you said, and the election as a connotation. I need to also correct another misconception.
Right.
When we talk of elections, we are not talking, there is a difference between just voting and election. Election is a cycle.
Right.
Okay? The moment a winner has been declared, accepted, and sworn in, the next cycle of election starts. So most of the time, we try to focus our attention of what happened on the voting day, which is vote trading, vote buying and selling. But there is a lot beyond that. HURIDAC is working with CISLAC with support from Mercator Foundation to start to change that narrative. So we have been working since last year trying to do 2 things. One, trying to impart information on the grassroots on how do they demand an anti-corruption plan from political parties contesting election. Now, it is possible that as a contestant or representing a party, I could promise heaven and hell. Of course, people promise heaven, they don't promise hell. Yeah, but the fact is that no matter the number of schools I promise, the number of roles I want to do, if I don't have a very robust anti-corruption plans, all those promises, irrespective of my intention, will disappear. So we need to start to ask, what is your anti-corruption plan?
Okay.
What is your anti-corruption footprint? And in the manifesto, the fact sheet that we launched 2 days ago, what we did was very simple research. We went on INEC website and picked the manifestos of 3 political parties.
Okay.
The APC, the PDP, and the Labour Party.
Which, of course, are the 3 major
parties. So we didn't ask them for their manifesto. We went to the manifesto that is on the INEC website. But we need to know that that manifesto has been there for ages. It was there when PDP was in power.
Oh, wow.
So when you look at, I will try to analyze it under 3 things. One is, what is their searching for corruption on their manifesto. How are they condemning corruption, for example? And we discovered that APC have some ideas on terms of condemning corruption.
Okay.
PDP didn't mention corruption at all.
In that manifesto?
In condemning it,
okay.
in that manifesto.
Right.
They didn't mention. If you go to the manifesto, anybody can download the manifesto. For APC, go to page 1, page 25, page 34, and page 29.
Okay.
So kind of condemn corruption in terms of that. Of course, they will do that because they were opposition party at that particular time. Then you have PDP who didn't mention any condemnation. Then you have Labour Party, page 4 and page 15.
Okay.
Now, we now went to promises they made about tackling corruption. Condemning corruption and tackling corruption are two different things. In this case, we have all these three political parties mentioning one thing or the other in terms of promises. Then we now went to what is your strategy of fulfilling these promises. Okay. So you have APC that's talking about the new APC government, because they are not in government then. At that time. And you have Labour Party, which go bust pan, and PDP didn't have any strategy. At all, in terms of doing that. Corruption. Now, we now step back and do something else. We pick up the internal constitution of these three political parties and look at their internal control of addressing corruption within themselves. Surprisingly, none of them have any internal controls in their constitution. There's nothing like if a party member embezzle party money, they will be expelled from the party or something like that. We didn't find that from the constitution we looked at. So that is the starting point for political parties. So it has to be instituted from the party level. Exactly, because if you don't have an internal process, a culture of anti-corruption, how will you address it when you are in power? Right. Okay? Right. So, but also for the politicians, this information is very important because they can now start to, review their manifestos, and they can try to make sure that their campaign promises is robust with anti-corruption plan. Right. So that's what we have been doing so far. From what you mentioned and the facts that you went into the INEC website, INEC is the umpire here. Of course. And those three manifestos probably may be outdated. Of course, but they are still there. But they're still there. They have not updated it. Right. So when we talk about working in today's reality, and all of those things that some of those parties may have mentioned in that manifesto that have been there for years, then are we really serious when we talk about wanting people to believe what it is that we write as political parties or flag bearers of political parties? Because as we speak, the manifesto there was before APC got into power, when PDP was in power. Now PDP is the leading opposition, APC is in power, and of course we still have the same manifesto that's been here for years. So if we were to take those manifesto, can we still hold the political parties responsible for those words, knowing that those words could have been outdated? Yeah, I think the first thing we need to look at is the issue of accountability. We need to start looking at voting behaviors in response to anti-corruption plan. Okay. If you have a manifesto, and that is, of course, a lot of the candidates will come out with their own manifesto. Right. So this information is important for them, that there is an outdated manifesto, assumably, on INEC website, so that all the political parties can start to actually go to INEC. Sorry, we have a new manifesto. That, but also that you are going to have candidate campaign promises. Now, part of the problem is that even when you bring all these political parties together, they need to actually have a robust plan how they will address corruption irrespective of other political parties. The kind of practice we are seeing is throwing shades, throwing stones to say, oh, you are in power, you spend so amount in doing this kilometer road, that is corruption. But we also want to go beyond that. You need to be telling us, how am I going to address this problem that I have seen? Okay? And the second thing also, which is totally important, is how do we allow the people we are governing to be our first army of attack against corruption? How do we empower the people? Corruption give and take, isn't it?
Right.
You give, those in government take. So how do we dismantle the give strand of corruption? By ensuring that the people at the grassroots can whistleblow, can have a user-friendly complaint mechanism, and because in some countries like in Rwanda, the ease of doing business is massive. You don't even have any physical contact with anybody. So the issue of taking bribe does not arise.
Okay.
Because they are built that into their
the system.
And we also need to start to ask our people to demand. Because now, from yesterday or 2 days ago, the politicians will start going to every local government now, every state of the federation. We need to start demanding accountability from them.
Okay.
Because that is crucial and that is important, because if we don't demand, they will not be forced to give us a plan. Right. I give a very good example why accountability is crucial. If I have my son or my daughter in school and get an homework, and they ask her 2 + 2 and she wrote 5, and took it back and the teacher marked it correct, and I check it at home, the next day I went to school to say, teacher, why did you mark 2 + 2? It's 4, it's not 5. And he apologized. That is the first homework that teacher will look at next time, because somebody is checking.
Right.
And that is exactly the scenario that we need to look at.
So, I mean, from the picture you've just painted, and if we're talking about, I remember earlier you talked about the fact that an election year, I mean, it's a cycle.
It's a cycle, yeah.
So when the 2023 election, by February, when that election is done, then we'll start planning for the next 4 years before another election is done. And so you've talked about the fact that being accountable to the people should become paramount on the minds of the politicians. And so if we were to go back to the promises that the ruling APC made in 2019 to Nigerians and where we are today, would you say that the electorate in Nigeria are beginning to wake up to their responsibilities, and this may begin to make or mar the future of political parties in Nigeria? Are people now ready to hold politicians accountable to those promises they've made and not being able to fulfill during the life cycle of that administration?
Thank you very much. I think I would say that the people will intend to hold political parties accountable. I'm not sure they are ready to do so. Okay. Because in holding them accountable is a separate process entirely. Right. It goes beyond political affiliation, ethnic biases, is my brother in government. It goes beyond that. Okay. It becomes a kind of a communal objective to be able to say that this is what is needed in our local government. This is what has been budgeted. How many of our people are tracking budget? Budget are online. This is what the APC representative of our program said. We need to be tracking local government budget to say, okay, this budget is to construct this maybe 100 meters quarter, what have you, is also amount. Are we checking whether that was done properly? Right. But are we even going beyond that to say we are bricklayer in our local government? Why can't we use those instead of getting somebody from the outside? Because if we do it ourselves, we can hold ourselves accountable as well. Okay. If it's getting problem, we can call Baba Beji that did it to say, come and fix it. Okay. So I don't think they are ready for that process yet, which is one of the work we are doing as an NGO.
So how do we get the people to be ready? Because if we are canvassing for us to get to that level where we can begin to hold our politicians accountable, irrespective of the political party they represent, if we can look them in the faces and say, well, years ago you promised you were going to do this. 3 years down the line, you haven't done this. And it doesn't even look like your party is ready to toe the path of what you've told us. So how do we get the people ready to begin to take responsibility as a people for the challenge ahead?
Thank you very much. In getting the people ready, they also need help, which is some of the work we are doing. Now, we will be tracking throughout this campaign promises, the campaign period, anti-corruption promises of political parties.
Okay.
So when you say something, we got one from Labour Party 2 days ago. We are going to set up a monitoring agency to monitor corruption in Lagos State. That is a promise, because that is a kind of a political transaction between those who intend to govern and those they are going to govern. Okay, in business, they call it gentleman agreement.
Right.
Okay, so we will take that on board. And if anyone that win the election, we'll be able to go back to them to say, these are the catalog of promises. We need an action plan in terms of how you are going to implement this.
Okay.
And if you're not giving an action plan, we could actually try to use advocacy or litigation on behalf of the people, to actually make sure that those in power will be accountable. Because it's political fraud if you lie to people to get their vote. And you end up not doing
that.
What you are going to do.
Okay.
At least if the transaction, there's something they call force majeure. Maybe you plan to build skyscraper and you go to government and the coffer is empty.
Right.
You have the responsibility to be accountable and explain to people what the challenges you are facing.
Okay.
But to totally ignore them and totally say, oh, that is campaigning, that will no longer be tolerated.
Okay.
We will do everything to make sure legally that those in power will be accountable for whatever they have said to the people.
Right. Remember, this conversation isn't just about Mr. Ameen and I. We expect that if you have a question, contribution, or observation, please get in touch with us in the studio this morning. The telephone line is 0811-266-8143, while you can send your SMS or WhatsApp to 009-470-9910. Don Sam here. Don Sam, thank you. It's been a while. We heard from you. Not everything will prayer do for us. We have our own part to take as well. And we need to do it right this time around. In 2023, all we need to do is think beyond tribalism and sentiment. We just need to vote right this time, to vote in competent leader, or else it is well. Thank you, Don Sam, for your message this morning. Taking a cue from Don Sam's message this morning, the election is just around the corner. Yeah. Campaigns have started, so definitely we'll start hearing all of those promises again.
Yeah, exactly.
And just like you rightly pointed out, that you've started taking note of some of these things that the candidates will tell us. Now, will you be monitoring only what the presidential candidates will be saying, or will this cut across all political offices? We have people contesting for governorship. We have people wanting to go to the National Assembly, to the state assemblies. So will the concentration be only for the presidential candidates? Yeah,
well, we have a lot of organization involved in this, but for ours, our focus is Lagos State.
Oh, okay.
So we are monitoring promises of gubernatorial candidates, promises of members of the House of Assemblies. Okay. So we'll be monitoring, and we are doing that majorly. For members of the House of Assembly, we are looking at the 5 major local governments, Alimosho, Koshofe, Ajeromi, Felodo, Ikorodu, and Moshe. And we already trained people in those local governments that are engaging with various stakeholders in that aspect. But maybe just to also mention that our experience as an organization goes beyond that, because we also monitor election. We're a West African regional organization. We monitor elections. We have done election monitoring in Sierra Leone. We have done it, all the election in Nigeria. We recently did it in Gambia last year as well. And you start to see a change in terms of consciousness of the people. So you start to see incumbent losing election, which is something that 20 years ago, it doesn't really happen. So I can say that the consciousness is happening. The role of social media is also having an impact on that. And the political arrogancy of political parties at times is now being, challenged by the people. So I think that is one good thing that is happening, because if somebody in power knows that the people have to determine whether he return or not, it will be forced to make sure he delivers good governance so that people can vote him. But if he relies on rigging, bribing, then he have no incentive to deliver good governance. It's cheaper for him to bribe or her than to deliver good governance. So I think that is one positive, that is changing. Anybody can lose election in this area. And that is why it is very important for politicians to make sure their message is very clear, not just kind of unfulfilled campaign promises. They need to be very clear on how those promises will be fulfilled. Whatever they are promising, what are the action plan? What will I do in the first 6 months? What will I do in the next 6 months? What will I do in a year? When will you start to see those changes I talked about? And how can the people become strong partner in this change and in this development?
Okay.
Those are the things we expect from political parties.
Right.
And those are also the things we expect from the people to make sure now they are voting for anti-corruption, not just for any political party or any candidate, because that is what will help them. That is what will put food on their table. That will what give them good roads. That will what will give their children good schools. And of course, if we calculate somebody that is giving 10,000 on election on voting day to vote for a particular candidate, that is averagely about 6 naira per day.
Oh, wow.
For the next 4 years. That is what that candidate is giving you to sell your heart, to sell your vote, to neglect the school of your children. It's just 6 naira per day.
Okay, but as we wrap up this conversation this morning, since, you know, the election, we cannot divorce the election from the whole process, even when whoever it is will occupy whichever position, there's a build-up to the election. And of course, there are actions and consequences at the polls. Yes. So of what importance would it be for the people to really be sure of how they will conduct themselves during election day itself? You talked about vote buying earlier. You talked about the fact that sometimes people will say, oh, this is about stomach infrastructure, as against, you know, what happens at the national level. So what will be the role of the people themselves on election day overall as a process towards the journey to good governance?
I think the first thing is for people to realize the importance of election in their life. It is more about, because we haven't developed to a stage whereby we can look at it. For example, look at the UK government. They have the National Health Services, NHS. Now, nobody, no British or no Briton believe that any political party that wins the election will cancel that. So they already know that their infrastructure is protected by the system. So their attitude to election is different. Okay? But for us, it's very important. Okay? Because if we don't vote for the right candidate, that will protect our interests, protect our infrastructure, protect our assets. Because at times people don't realize that those roads we see belong to us. It doesn't belong to the government. They are just there to help us to manage it.
Right.
And if they look at it within that, they will take the voting on that day serious. They know they are voting not for stomach infrastructure, they will be voting for accountability. They should be voting for good roads, good schools, and so many other things. Okay.
All right. As we go this morning, Mr. Ameen, this is a project for you. Is this going to be a continuous project, or is it just for the 2023 election? Or is this something that you've decided to take on? And just like Serap would always sue the president and others for not doing the right thing, would you also tour that path, or for you it's just going to be a process of collating your researches?
Well, I think we are trying to do two things. One, we are trying to build capacity, both with the political parties, to say these things is important. You need to have a robust anti-corruption plan. But we are also building capacity with the community to say you need to be asking the anti-corruption question. You need to be demanding for accountability. And so. And then the second aspect of it is actually, like I mentioned before, tracking the campaign promises. And after the election, we will be monitoring that. We will be engaging with whoever that wins the election. And we'll be providing a platform between the people and the victorious candidate for them to tell them a timeline now, a timeline of when these promises will be fulfilled. And we can give them a kind of a sample of what we think of so that they can work on it. And advocacy is there for us, litigation is there for us, we will look at various options to make sure that the people actually got promises given to them fulfilled. We don't want a situation whereby the people are politically defrauded with empty promises. So we want the people to hold them accountable, and the politician needs to be aware of that, that we are watching, other organizations are watching. So before you actually say something, you need to make sure you have a plan on how you are going to implement that thing.
All right. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Ayodele Ameen, Executive Director, Human Rights Advancements Development and Advocacy Center, HURIDAC, for coming on the program today.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with our guest this morning, and he's helped us to realize or understand some of our roles and responsibilities as the electorate, and the need for us to continue to hold the politicians more accountable for their promises, especially now that the 2023 election is just round the corner. We'll take a quick break on the program. When we return, Godwin is in the studio this morning. He will take you through the Thursday edition of Sports Splash.